Chapter 17. School ended 2 weeks later without any other major catastrophes, either in my life or the world at large. And with the successful completion of all my classes, I finally had some downtime after work. Downtime I didn't really want. It meant too much free time to think about what, or more accurately who, I didn't have in my life anymore. Kathy had noticed almost immediately that something was wrong. I'd always had a hard time hiding my emotions when life took a turn for the worse. She was sympathetic, but also a little too annoyingly practical. "It wasn't a real relationship anyway," she'd told me. "You never actually met." Internally, I fumed at being told that. Maybe we hadn't met, and maybe it wasn't supposed to work out, despite my continued belief to the contrary. But damn it, it was real to me. Real emotions, real love, real loss. On the other side of the coin, she was thrilled for me that I was going on the study abroad program, even if that meant I would have to temporarily stop working with her. "You're going to love it, I'm sure," she told me for the umpteenth time on my last day with her before my trip. "I'm going to miss you, but I'm so excited you get this opportunity. Have you decided what activities you're going to sign up for?" I thought about the list I'd read over so many times I practically had it memorized. "Everything sounds amazing," I answered Kathy. "I wish I could do everything, but I'm taking so many classes, I know I won't have enough time for it all. At the least, though, I want to go on the boat cruise through the Twilight Zone." Kathy nodded. "That sounds like fun. Just be careful you don't go too far and get the Yedramora angry at you." I smiled. "That's why you go on a guided tour. They know exactly how far you're allowed to go and where you need to turn around. That's also why you're not allowed to wander into the jungle on your own. Anyone who does that gets sent back home immediately and suspended from school for the rest of the term. I guess there's some kind of deal between Balim and the school regarding access to the jungle." "That would make sense," Kathy agreed. "Especially now that we know the Yedramore actually exist. I never doubted it, of course, but a number of things have changed in the Indonesian and Brazilian areas." I nodded. We had seen it on TV. Now that they had announced themselves, representatives of both the Yedramora and the Yedramorai, the former from the Amazon and the latter from Indonesia, had come forward in an effort to form diplomatic relationships with the rest of the world. But in all their talks, the Yedramore had never tried to convince us that Marahassin wasn't a terrorist organization, which only made people more uncomfortable and let the extremist news shows talk about them as if they were the new Nazis. It also didn't help that no evidence had been found to support their claim that friends had attacked them first. Despite all this, I hadn't once second-guessed my choice to travel, even if it was to the edge of possible enemy territory. "There's also an exhibit in Balim displaying artifacts found in the Amazon by early explorers," I continued. "I think I'd like to see that if I have a chance. And a library." "Won't the school have a library?" "Yes, but they won't have all the authentic literature of the region like the local libraries will," I answered excitedly. "Imagine all the myths and folklore they'll have collected living on the edge of the Amazon." Kathy smiled at my enthusiasm. "I'm sure you'll find time to do everything you want." I shook my head. "I wish, but I'll damn well try." When the end of my shift rolled around, I gave Kathy a big hug before I left. "I'll miss you, sweetie," she told me. "I'll be back in a couple months," I reminded her. "You just be sure to stick around until then." She grinned. "I'll do my best. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories." I scratched Shadow behind his ears on my way out. "You take care of her," I told him. He stuck his tongue out and panted happily at me. "We take care of each other," Kathy said, smiling at and petting her dog as he snuggled up next to her on the bed. I arrived at Aaron's house just under half an hour later. The front door was cracked, so I let myself in. "Hello?" I called as I closed the door behind me. "Hey, Z," Aaron greeted me, coming out of his room and giving me a hug. I laughed, hugging him back. "What, you're not so engrossed in something that I have to tear you away using the jaws of life today?" He returned my laugh. "Not today. I made sure I got most of my stuff done earlier." "Most of it?" He shrugged. "I'll have to spend a little time sometime later to finish up my theoretical quanticum mathematics homework." I dropped my mouth open in an exaggerated surprise. "You talk about it like it's as easy as a stroll through the park." I teased him about it, but I was honestly impressed. That level of math was like 6 tiers above anything I was ever able to comprehend. "I do?" he asked in mock confusion. "I always thought it was simpler than that." "Only if you're carrying a 5-ton elephant on your shoulders while you walk." "You shouldn't do that. You might hurt yourself. Start with a 1-ton car and work your way up." We started laughing at the same time. "Why don't you go finish that now?" I told him. "I've got your next 2 days booked." "It's okay, really. I can do it Sunday after you leave." Last chance to change your mind, I warned him. He shook his head, grinning. From now on until you leave tomorrow, I'm all yours. I laughed again. Okay, what's on our list for today then, good sir? How does collecting some cats in your entire wardrobe, followed by point of contact until nightfall, then popcorn and a Dark Stars movie marathon sound? I'm not taking my entire wardrobe on the trip, I exclaimed, then paused dramatically. Only 3/4 of it. Aaron laughed. We made the quick drive over to my place to gather the bags I'd packed for my 2-month trip to Brazil. We had decided that since it was the last weekend before my trip, Aaron and I would spend a couple days hanging out, I'd stay over, and he'd take me to the transport station for my departure on Saturday night. Since Belém was 4 hours ahead of my time zone and transports only worked during nighttime hours, the latest travel arrangements I had been able to make had been around midnight. I wanted as much time as possible to hang out with Aaron before I headed off into the wild unknown. Okay, so at the end of the day, maybe I was a little anxious about leaving the country and following my traveling dreams after all. My bags had been packed for almost a week as I kept adding this and that to them as I thought about everything I'd need. My virtual reality computer was quickly bagged with my sleepover supplies after we arrived at my apartment. The cats, however, took a little longer to wrangle into carriers. It took several trips for us to get all the food, bowls, litter boxes, cats, and baggage to the car, and I was definitely considering moving to a first-floor apartment again by the time we were done. Of course, it took just as many trips to unload all my stuff when we got back to Aaron's place, but he didn't have any stairs to climb. Eventually, we had all the pet supplies set up in their new home for the next 2 months, along with the cats freed to explore the small house. I sighed and plopped down on the couch in the living room, looking at Aaron expectantly. What? He asked, bewildered. Are you going to start the game or what? I asked. He watched me for a moment. You know we can't play unless you get your VR gear out, right? It's right there, I said, waving my hand toward a bag next to me. He cocked an eyebrow at me wryly. What? You said you were mine earlier. Doesn't that mean you're my servant and do everything I want you to do? He rolled his eyes and shook his head, smiling. I chuckled, reached over to my bag, and pulled out the wireless connector for the headset. I tossed it to him and he plugged it in, grabbing his own headset on the way back to the couch. We spent the next 5 hours playing our game, including 2 attempts at the last battle before we beat it. We decided that on our first playthrough, we would try to make peace with the aliens. But we'd made a deal not to look up any information about the story ahead of time, so we're pleasantly surprised to learn that after completing the game, there was an option to replay it as the alien race and follow a second storyline that ran parallel to the first. We can start that tomorrow, I told him. Right now, I'm starving. What do you have for dinner? Aaron drawled. I huffed. You don't have anything planned? He shrugged. There's probably something in the fridge or freezer. He followed me into the kitchen and watched over my shoulder as I checked the fridge for food. A number of leftovers, something or another's, were filling the shelves. Nothing good for a meal for us, though. I pulled open the freezer door and saw a decorative box inside. What's that? I asked and pulled it out to get a better look at it. And inside was an ice cream cake that read, "Congratulations," on top. I turned to Aaron, puzzled. He was grinning like an idiot behind me. I couldn't find any that said, "Have fun on your trip to the Amazon," so I figured that would work. You could also consider it an early birthday cake since you'll be out of the country on the actual day. I returned his smile and chuckled. Looks good to me, thanks. I paused. It's still not dinner, though. Aaron reached into the freezer and pulled out a bag of frozen beef stir-fry. How's this? He asked. Teriyaki, I noted. I like it. 30 minutes later, we were seated on the couch again, each with a plate of cooked stir-fry and rice in our laps, and ice cream cake slices and a giant bowl of popcorn on the table in front of us. The lights had been turned off to give our viewing a theater vibe. Aaron started up the first movie, simply named Dark Stars. It's hard to describe the difference between tech and Magicus videos because it's not something you consciously notice. But where classical video created a movie by piecing together still images, Magicus video was like a stream of changing elements, one moment melting into the next. This meant that Magicus video was smoother and cleaner than classical, but it was also much harder to store and reproduce. Most movie companies converted Magicus filmed night scenes into digital frames and sold their movies in classical format only. But somehow, Aaron had gotten a hold of a set of the Dark Stars trilogy in the original, purely Magicus formats. Call it a perk of attending the top schools in the world, he said when I asked how he managed to get it. Also, I was owed a favor or two by someone in the film department. I snorted in amusement and settled in for our movie marathon. It was a science fiction series that began with a plague and ended with 100 people stranded on an alien world. Sometime during the second movie, after all our food had been eaten, I found myself cuddled up next to Aaron. I was caught off guard when I realized it. Aaron and I had been friends for years, sure, and we didn't avoid physical contact, but we'd never really been close in a girlfriend-boyfriend kind of way. Hell, we'd never even talked about it as a possibility. I realized I'd probably done it because I was longing for some comfort from someone. It had been a month since Mikhail had left, and I'd not heard a word of him since, but I was still struggling with accepting he was gone. Breakups had never been easy for me to deal with. I thought that maybe I should move, but Aaron either didn't notice or didn't care, so I decided to stay where I was for the remainder of the movie. When the second movie ended, he didn't get up to switch it out to the third one. "Should I do it?" I offered. "Nah, I will." He still didn't move, and I looked at him quizzically. He nodded towards the television. I looked over as the movie credits blinked off. In the light from the screen, I saw the movie eject from the player and float over to the table with the other movies. The case for the third movie opened up, and the video disc made its way to the player. "Show off," I teased him. "Nah, just making the best use of my natural talent." He winked at me, and the movie started playing without either of us moving a muscle. It ended sometime just before 2 in the morning. I headed to the bathroom to change into my pajamas, brush my teeth, and take my sleeping meds. When I emerged, Aaron had blown up an air mattress and arranged it on the floor in the living room. "What's this about?" I asked him. "You can have the bed tonight," he told me, draping some blankets on top of the mattress. "No, it's your house, your bed." "And you're the guest. You take the bed," he insisted. "Fine then," I conceded and walked over to grab a corner of the air mattress. "But you're not sleeping out here." "Hey, wait!" he called after me as I dragged the impromptu bed into the bedroom and dropped it beside his actual bed. "Well, I was going to give you some privacy." "More like you were trying to hide from me," I teased him and threw his pillow at him. He caught it, laughing. "You got me. I totally wanted to stay as far away from you as possible." I stuck out my tongue at him and found a spare pillow in the closet. He did his nightly routine to get ready for bed, and we were both under our respective covers in less than 10 minutes. One of my cats, I didn't look to see which one, picked a spot at my feet to curl up. "You sure you don't want the bed?" I asked one last time. "Positive," he said from the floor. "I'm going to smell like you in the morning," I complained. "Is that a bad thing?" Dramatically, I inhaled the scent from the sheets. They smelled like a soap company's idea of a tropical waterfall. "Ugh, when did you wash these last?" "This morning, actually, so don't go acting like they smell like 3 cumulative months of sweat." I could hear the grin in his voice. "Maybe I would have preferred that." "Well then, next time you come over, I'll make sure they're nice and used." "Thank you," I replied in mock seriousness. "I'd appreciate that very much." He snickered and I grinned. Settling comfortably into the strange bed, with Aaron's soft breathing nearby, I quickly fell asleep.